Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on The Last Word tonight. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Tomorrow at the Safari Park, the annual National Prayer Breakfast will be held, and of course, it is time for seeking for divine intervention. At a time, the country, one, is grappling with heavy and weighty matters. On one hand, the Supreme Court now being referred to as a supreme joke by some, and on the other hand, you have the grandstanding that continues between the government and the opposition. And this, that are matters that have heightened the political temperatures in the country, reminiscent for many, for some of the things we saw happen in the 2007, just before the post-election violence. And there has been concern on whether we are fast heading to the brink down that same path and what must be done to avert the same. Joining me in studio tonight for this conversation is Koigi Wawamwere, who's former Member of Parliament Subukia, also was one of the detainees, political detainees if you like. And also with us tonight is one Mr. Dunstan Omari, as you see him right there on that split screen, is a political analyst and a lecturer as well. So we'll be conversing the issues with them. And we also want you to be part of the conversation tonight. Talk to us. Tweet me at Sophia Wanuna. What is your prayer for Kenya as the politicians will be congregating and other stakeholders at the Safari Park and praying for the country? Do you believe there is significance on this? Will this be that event, and will these prayers mark a turnaround, or will it be a ritual as we've seen every year, coming together and praying? But before we get into the discussion, let me just bring you up to speed with some of the stories that we were covering for you, our top 3 stories tonight. And the Kenyan Supreme Court has been plunged into a potential crisis after mediation talks failed between Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal, suspended Judge Philip Tunoi, and the Judicial Service Commission in the retirement age dispute. Now, the 2 judges are opposing their retirement at 70 years. The last hope of resolving the dispute out of court now lies in a meeting to be held tomorrow between the JSC and the Law Society of Kenya. And of course, we are following that story, and we'll bring you all the developments as they occur. Now, from the Kenyan Supreme Court, let's go to the International Criminal Court, which has today rejected a request by Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto to have the Office of the Prosecutor investigated. Ruto's legal counsel and had petitioned the court to order investigations into information received by the defense in the course of the trial against him. Ruto's team had argued they believed that several witnesses or ICC staff members may have committed offences against the administration of justice. The suspected offences include giving false testimony, presenting false evidence, and corruptly influencing a witness. In its decision rejecting the request, Trial Chamber 5A said it vacated all the charges and discharged both Ruto and Joshua Sang, and considers that it would be inappropriate to preside over Ruto's new petition. The chamber, however, suggests that if Ruto wants the Office of the Prosecutor investigated over its conduct, they can go all the way back to the pretrial chamber and start afresh. And of course, as well, tonight we're covering for you the Kenyan Opposition Coalition CORD has unveiled the names of 5 members and 2 joint secretaries that would represent them in a case of any possible dialogue on reforming the Electoral Commission. The team, which will be led by Senators James Orengo and Johnston Muthama, will now be waiting for the Jubilee side to respond if the president changes his mind over the dialogue push. But as Chris Thari told us earlier in a report, the Jubilee Coalition has insisted that any dialogue must be conducted within the confines of Parliament. All right, so to our discussion tonight, again, remember the National Prayer Breakfast at Safari Park tomorrow. I would like to hear from you. What is your prayer for Kenya at this point with all of the issues the country is grappling with? Feel free to tweet me at Sophia Wanuna. Also, we'll have our phone numbers on your screen. They'll be scrolling down there so you can call in live and participate in our discussion tonight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on The Last Word. Let's begin with the occurrences today at the judiciary. You know, saying that many people now referring to the Supreme Court as a supreme joke, and this coming in after the Constitution, and this was some of the reforms and changes that the drafters and Kenyans in endorsing this Constitution felt would get us to a different chapter, a better place in as far as our progress is concerned. But LSK and the judiciary failing to strike a deal, and you've all been following the intrigues in the judiciary. Do you feel, Mr. Omare, that there are certain forces that are orchestrating the events we are seeing unfold in the judiciary, that this is not purely events of their own making, taking a normal flow? It's certain individuals that are making sure a certain end is met.
As a victim of injustice in the hands of a judiciary that was not independent, for many years we prayed that this country would have a judiciary that would be able to dispense justice.
Right.
And we have been waiting for a very long time. And finally, when we got the new constitution, we thought, yes, now we have that judiciary. But some of us have been to courts and have not felt quite convinced that our courts have quite changed from what they used to be. A lot of times when seated in court, I have felt the same way I felt before the new constitution and the so-called reformed judiciary. Now, as to the crisis that judiciary finds itself in, I'm of the feeling that it is self-inflicted. But it has also to do with, it must have something to do with the general scrabble for power and resources that has engulfed the entire country. They are a part of us. And if everybody is scrabbling for power, resources, and whatever, they will be part of that scrabble. And I think that is really what is ailing the judiciary currently.
Yeah, currently. Are you shocked, Omari, with the conduct of these judges? You've seen the various moves that have been made, the Court of Appeal coming up with this decision on the retirement age question, Judge Njoki Ndongo coming in as well, giving the 26th as the hearing date, the Chief Justice moving that forward today, the two sitting together on a bench, on a matter to decide on whether each or the other conducted themselves inappropriately. Is this a big joke? Are we being taken for a ride as a country?
One thing that I will put Kenyans to understand is that the Supreme Court is not really per se a court that is excluded or divorced from politics. The mandate of the Supreme Court, one, is to determine presidential petitions. That is a political battle, and that whoever sits as the president decides on allocation of resources to every 47 counties. So the Supreme Court deals with matters political. It also deals with matters moral. For example, the questions of gender, how do we get women to get their positions? Those are very emotive issues. So when you look at what the courts deal with are mostly public interest matters.
Yes.
And those public interest matters, from a Kenyan eyes and a Kenyan prism, they look at it from a political and subconscious ethnic perspectives. So whatever or whoever sits there is seen more of a quasi-political realignment. If my person is seated there, there's a possibility when the presidential petition appears there, they will look at it from that angle. So because of that, the politics of Supreme Courts are not only in this country. In the US, recently when one of the Supreme Court judges died, and President Obama insisted on appointing that person, and the others are saying, no, you are a lame duck president who is supposed to exit.
In the twilight.
You are on the twilight lights of your life. He insisted on appointing a Democrat so that the Republicans feel that they are going to take power through Donald Trump. Therefore, it is their duty to appoint a Supreme Court judge.
Yeah.
So worldwide, politics of the Supreme Court are common. In the Kenyan scenario, the only issue that makes it being seen as a joke, a big joke for this nation, is the question of succession. The succession of the CJ, the succession of the deputy CJ, the succession, if indeed the law is found to be that retirement age is 70, then puts that 3 judges of the of the Supreme Court are going, and there will be a replacement of these 3 judges.
Yeah.
2 senior heads, the CJ and the deputy, and justice to know his position, which must be filled if the courts find out that retirement age is 70. So this becomes very political. This is not more than 400 days before the elections. The IBC has a situation that is still pending in the eyes of the Republic.
Okay.
So the 2 organs will determine who will be pronounced to have won the elections and who will be confirmed judiciously to take the instruments of power in the event of a dispute. So that is why you see the question of succession is becoming so critical. There is no political formation that will not be interested in making sure their people sit at the Supreme Court.
So Koigi, then, in hindsight now, did we create a problem in forming a Supreme Court?
No, I think that having a Supreme Court was a very good idea.
Yeah.
We actually needed it, and we still do. I think the problem has, despite the fact that, yes, if you have a court that is politically appointed, it will be a political court, but only to some extent. All things are political in the long run, even churches, even farming. Even
although the power has been taken largely from the president, it's more ceremonial now because the JSC is who determines the final person.
Yeah,
right.
But the judiciary itself has muscle. The trouble is that they have been infighting, and infighting without a sense of shame, because even in our homes we fight, but we try to make sure that the neighbors don't hear us as we fight. We try to keep the fight inside, not outside. Now these ones are fighting, and fighting outside for everybody to see. Some of the principles of law that we see flouted, they are shameful, they are embarrassing even for common people. And in any case, you know, this is the one court that is supposed to maintain sanity for the whole country. When politicians go mad, they are supposed to run to the courts for protection. When we oppress one another, that is where we go for protection. When everything goes bad in the country, really, that should be the place to offer recourse to all of us. But the trouble is that this court now is collapsing.
But you said
and
we shouldn't give up
collapsing
hope
only some years after its formation.
Right.
So I believe that the process of self-cannibalization, because I think this is really what it is, needs to be put to a stop. But who will do so? And yet we cannot actually, one would not want to contemplate the consequences of this court collapsing or being disbanded.
Yeah.
It's something that we must have. And yet they don't even look like they are able to heal themselves. Otherwise you would say, physician, heal thyself.
Yeah, because now, there's interests of conflict of interest that we're seeing arising across.
So I think the problem is in the nature of the persons who are elected into offices in the Supreme Court, because I believe that ultimately judges are persons who are supposed to put principle before everything else, to put truth and those are the high values above everything else, above self-interest. And yet, and there are also people who are supposed to be persons of great thought, great deep thought.
Right.
People who can unravel the sort of problems that are difficult for the rest of us.
Yes.
But they have not actually given us evidence that there are that kind of court.
But
So
where-
sometimes you wonder whether, if a court is this weak, shouldn't it go by the nature of things, collapse and be gotten rid of and be replaced with another one? And yet, the consequences would be,
Dire.
we are also as the sort of country that would be happy to get, the current ruling class would be happy not to have a Supreme Court. They don't want their powers being chipped, by, being cut off by either the Supreme Court or any other court that is strong enough to be able to do that.
An independent judiciary.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we are in danger if we don't play this game well and survive it. It means that we could go many years back to where we were before.
Because, you know, and Omari, we go back to how is this situation then salvaged? Because at the end of the day, we're looking at individuals looking out for their personal interest. The law says this, but certain judges have felt, no, they disagree with that. They want to turn back and rely on their terms of employment, you know, to be able to retire at age 74. And so mediation, again, an option out there, and tomorrow we'll see whether the parties will be able to agree, LSK and the Judicial Service Commission. How do you see this playing out? Because if that collapses, then it goes back to be determined by people, judges who we already know where they stand. They have, in one way or the other, already pronounced themselves on the question of retirement.
When we look at the historical perspective of where we find ourselves in, one,
Yeah.
it is only in Kenya where Supreme Court judges apply for a job. And they are competitively recruited worldwide.
Yes.
Worldwide, judges of the Supreme Court are appointed by the president, are nominated by the president, then their names are forwarded for parliament, for vetting, then they are appointed. As we were so overzealous, because of the Moi era where we were coming from, and people said that they must apply for a job, like Sophie Wanuna will apply for a job at KTN. So that is the situation we find ourselves in. So once these people apply, who do they apply to? Who is the employer? The CJ
GSC.
sits
And
as
the
the head
JSC.
of the Judicial Service Commission. He also sits as the president of the court. A direct conflict of interest. Smokin Wanjala sits at the Supreme Court as a judge. He sits at the JSC as an employer. He's also a contestant in case the CJ retires early. He is also going to apply for this job. He's going to appear before his colleagues in the same panel he sits to vet people. Judges who are also gunning, there is one judge from the Court of Appeal, there is one judge from the High Court, there is a chief magistrate. All these are people who have an interest to take the job of the CJ or the deputy CJ. Then you also have the Attorney General. He's a member of this, the JSC. The Attorney General is the state advisor. He's also a member of the JSC. When the case is in court, he also becomes an amicus, a friend to the court, a serious conflict of interest. Then you have also the chair of the Public Service Commission. The chair of the Public Service Commission comes in with the executive powers, a direct conflict. Are we separating the judiciary from totally the executive? So by the mere composition, we created a mongrel.
So then are you in support of the amendment that had been made to the Judicial Service Act that was, of course, nullified by the court, allowing the president the powers, you know, give him a list of 3 and he selects the final person to go to CJ or DCJ?
The independence of the judiciary is totally outside the purview of the president. He has no right to interfere with who he appoints. The question that Kenyans now should be asking is, do we avoid this thing called competitive recruitment? 2, do we have people who have read Article 10 very clearly and understand that as a citizen, when you have an office, you serve on the trust of the people. You are patriotic. Instead, what we are seeing a new crop of entitlement. A Kenyan, once he gets a security of tenure of a job, he does not care whether the public, the employer, wants him out or not. He will hold the country at ransom. He or she is ready to destroy the nation because he or she has a security of tenure. So in my own view, where we need to fix it right is to make people understand that there is a time public interest overweighs selfish individual interests.
So he says we were overzealous in making it this competitive process to getting the judges, and as well disagrees that the president should have that mandate to unilaterally then select at the end of the process who the CJ or DCJ becomes. So then what are we saying in terms of going forward? What is that system that would work? What is that process in getting us these individuals that would work?
First, let me say that I think we are not exactly overzealous. If you take into account the injustices that Kenyans went through, from the time we got our independence to the time when we had the new constitution, with a judiciary that didn't enjoy a tenure at all, with a judiciary that was was appointed, where judges would be appointed in public meetings by the president, and they equally sought employment in public meetings, calling themselves prodigal sons that needed to be saved and all that.
Yes.
Then you would excuse whatever looks like overzealousness on the part of Kenyans. Because we really we were coming from the most imperfect. We were looking for something that could liberate us once and for all. And so we were zealous. I don't think I want to call it overzealous yet. And I think it is good that judges enjoy security of tenure. Only then can they be independent.
Yes.
And but we have a crisis, and this crisis, I'm trying to wonder what could be the exact cause of it. Is it the system that was applied in putting them into place, or is it some inherent weakness on the part of the individual judges? I tend to believe that the problem is in the individual judges.
So then would you agree with Apollo Mboya, former CEO LSK, who's asking the JSC to find that especially 3 judges misconducted themselves and to have a tribunal formed to investigate them? That's Mohamed Ibrahim, Jackton Ojwang, and Njoki Ndongo. And in fact, for Njoki Ndongo, he's gone a second time on this latest issue to say that they be found to have misconducted themselves. And initially they did find that, but they did not form a tribunal.
Exactly.
They simply
glossed over.
Yes.
Even removed the word gloss, misbehavior.
Yes.
Exactly. To be able to get away with it.
They just said misconduct.
To excuse their colleagues. Yes. So I think that what we really need are judges who are not in their offices to serve self-interest, but are there to serve the greater good of the entire country. And if wrong appointments have been made, and we have wrong persons in these offices,
right,
we need a system, a corrective system that is ruthless. Just like for the rest of us outside the judiciary, if you steal, you are supposed to be taken care of by the law without mercy. Equally, when they flout the law or the principles that are supposed to guide them, when they pursue self-interest recklessly, then they should not be stomached. And action should be taken against them.
Right.
And there should be no delay in taking action against them. Apparently, I don't think that what we are witnessing now is something that just began to happen yesterday.
Even with the tribunal now that is looking into the allegations against Judge Tunoi, isn't that to show that the system is not tolerating?
It's rotten. It has had problem. And remember, this Tunoi case should have been heard 2 years back. So we have a problem. The system has been rotting. Okay. So there has even been resistance to the reforms that Kenyans wanted from within the judiciary.
All right.
So we have to decide that the judiciary should be treated with the same thoroughness as anybody else. And that when we pick judges, no other factors other than perfect merit should be allowed to play a part in their selection.
All right, and we'll continue with this conversation. We want to take a short break, and of course we'll talk about as well on the other side in as far as IEBC is concerned. Today we saw the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy unveil their team that would engage with Jubilee if they so agree to dialogue. So we'll talk about that, but don't forget tomorrow the National Prayer Breakfast, and we'll be taking your calls and also hearing your thoughts in as far as the prayers tomorrow. What's your prayer for Kenya? Is it time now we all go down on our knees and seek divine intervention? And perhaps some of these parties in these issues should be the first online in as far as having their hands laid on them as we pray. We're taking a break. We'll be back shortly. Stay with us.
I thank all Kenyans for coming together in prayer and thanksgiving. I also thank all Kenyans, men and women of God, who have led us in praying for one another, for our families and for our country. Above all, I thank God for His mercies since we met here for our National Prayer Breakfast last year.
I call upon all Kenyans to pray for all leaders to embrace the spirit of constructive dialogue and a genuine commitment to selflessly seek solutions to the challenges involved in implementing our new constitutional order. I urge leaders not to politicize the challenges facing the implementation of this new order, but instead provide practical solutions that will help us succeed and improve the lives of our people.
When the chairman announced that Jacoyo Midio was going to read Jacoyo Midio was going to read the scriptures, I thought it was a mistake. But not until the president pointed to me that Baba Yao was actually in the choir. Then I said, it's all right. and I remembered, of course, that there is a God up there who doesn't judge us from the eyes of men. And I want to thank God for the choir. They sang very well. And the choir which was here.
All right, we've heard there from Deputy President William Ruto, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and retired President Moi Kibaki in a previous prayer day, and we'll have the National Prayer Breakfast tomorrow at the Safari Park. And gentlemen, before we talk about IEBC and what we're likely to see in coming days, what for you is the essence of prayer, and do we achieve that in these National Prayer Days that we hold each year? I'll begin with you.
The essence of prayer, to me, is actually looking up to God and asking for strength where someone has been weak, asking for forgiveness where one has fallen, and asking for betterment. You really want to be a better human being. We pray because we realize that we are inherently weak and need support from above. But we have also to understand that prayer, as is understood in this country, is not something personal or individual. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having churches. Church prayers are led by the churches, and I suppose that's why tomorrow we shall be having the prayers at Parliament.
Okay.
My only problem is whether the church as we have it today, whether it has moral authority to conduct prayers, although of course here I have a problem because I don't know what the prayers are held for, to pray for what.
For the issues like now,
if it is for the issues, then they have a lot to pray for because we have an economic crisis for the majority of our people. We have a political crisis for the political class. We have a moral crisis, if you ask me. We have a judicial crisis. All these crises need to be prayed for. But I'm not sure that the people who will be meeting tomorrow will be praying for the nation or for those crises to end. They will probably be praying to God to give them more power and to bring down their political enemies.
All right. Yeah, it will not be...
That is much easier to do than asking them to pray for the country. Because if you pray for your country and you are the one sabotaging it, if you pray to end the judicial crisis and you are the one involved in it, then obviously this thing, your prayers will not be honest prayers.
Okay. Your views on the same, sir?
To me, God is the omnipresent and the one we run to whenever we first admit that we have been unreasonable, we have been unaccommodating, we have become totally people of two grandstanding positions, that we have refused to look at the less fortunate, that is Wanjiku. We are fighting for our own selfish interests. I hope that the prayer meeting tomorrow shall be a prayer in remembrance of Wanjiku, that none of the two political divides is really caring for that person called Wanjiku. Remember, God is the God of the oppressed. God is the God of the weak. God is the God of the widows and the orphans. But are those prayers that we see every other time focused on that? So the question of sincerity, the question of the people offering those prayers, the church has lost the moral fiber. We are more ethnic-based. We are more politically and party-based, other than looking as the church being the light of the nation, the church being the way and the way that leads to the mass getting what they want. What we are seeing is a church that has taken a political stand. You've seen in the IBC, the church cannot talk with one voice. Each is on its own.
Yeah.
You saw it during the referendum, one church was saying, eat the ndizi, the other one was saying, eat the chungwa. I hope tomorrow, for the first time, the Almighty God will descend with his angels and touch the hearts of the people who are praying not to go to eat breakfast, to remember that very few can afford that breakfast.
Amen.
Very few can afford it to appear in those halls.
True.
Those people who are suffering should be the focus of the people who are going there. I do concur with him that in those prayers, there'll be two prayers. One to retain power and the other one to ascend to power. If that is the essence of that prayer, then it does not help us at all. It is a time that the nation needs to think and rethink on how we are going to avert the imminent collapse of this nation.
Right.
So to me, prayer is not a talk show. Prayer is not a show-off. Prayer is humility and being humble and submitting to to the God and say, may you assist me provide proper leadership to this nation.
And we'll talk about IEBC and how that's unfolding. We saw the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy today announce the members they would have seats in that dialogue team.
But
and
before we come to IEBC.
Yes, because I want us to listen to a cross-section of Kenyans on prayers.
Yes.
If you wanted to make a comment on prayers,
Then
you
I
will be
can make a comment after.
after that. So let's listen to what
Okay.
some Kenyans had to say about the National Prayer Breakfast that will be held tomorrow.
Kulingana vile country iko inaumba upande maybe IBC code Jubilee, sababu sisi wote ni watu wa Mungu. Kenye naweza sema kwamba address pale kesho waongee vile wanaweza weka maneno pamoja na tusiwe na vita. Code IBC waelewane.
I think that they should really pray for all the poor people in the country. There are a lot of people suffering, all the poor people on the street. There's so many people who are really in need, and being the parliamentarians, they can not only pray, but they can also take a step towards helping the poor.
I think we should pray for unity, because as a youth, I honestly think unity is the best thing to be prayed for, because we all deserve to be united, not disunited as Kenyans, because unity we stand, so unity is the best thing.
All right, Kenyans talking about what it is that have us pray for. But the beauty, one of you I think talked about this, is on one hand you will pray and say all of these things in public, but God is not man that he should be fooled. He sees motives, that if on one hand we're the ones orchestrating all of these things we're saying play out, we cannot then pretend to come and say the other thing. But you wanted to say something before we move on to
what I
IBC.
wanted to say was that, yes, I would very much like tomorrow's prayers to be about Wanjiko and to be about the poor. But in my view, I think that the church we have, which we will be presiding over, and which will be the voice of those who will be gathered there to God, right now has lost its moral credibility to be able to supervise such a prayers.
Right.
And I say so because when you look at the church as is in the Bible, it is a church ought to have two sides to it. We need a church that has prophets. Prophets who can speak truth to power. And there are times when we used to have such prophetic voices in the church. The days of Bishop Okulu, the days of Bishop Muge, the days of Reverend Njoya,
Right.
Dingi Mwana Wanzeki. They could stand up to any force and say what they thought was wrong. But the church as we have it today is not capable of doing that. So I don't believe that they will be able to solve the problem of Wanjiko. The other thing is that if you want the church to, if you want to dedicate those prayers, you say, to Wanjiko, you need to have values. But as I said, I think that we have a moral crisis,
Right.
because we have lost our values.
Our values.
And we have lost our values because of two things. I will just mention them very briefly.
Yes.
One is wealth. One is power. Somebody said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
The other thing that has been eating into our values is the question of poverty.
Yes.
And Nyerere also said that poverty corrupts. And absolute poverty corrupts absolutely. But this time, the first part of corruption is against the rich.
The rich.
The second part of corruption is against the poor.
All right.
So that even poor are not able to liberate themselves against the oppression they face from the wealthy.
From the wealthy. All right, let's listen to Helen, who's calling us from Migori. Helen, thank you for watching tonight and for calling as well. Talk to us briefly, your thoughts, or question or comment?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, sir.
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
I can only say that Kenya is at a critical moment. And we appreciate that the prayers day is going to be marked tomorrow. So we ask all our leaders to be humble before God and let them know that there's nothing they can do without God.
All right.
Let's look at all the leaders in the Bible. They were all anointed by God. And before you are anointed, there is no way you become a leader. So it's just an example that I'm giving to those who are in power and those who are in opposition. Those who are in the opposition should know that maybe their time has not come. They should be humble and wait for their time. They may think that they have got many supporters, but in the real sense, they have got few.
All right.
So
Yeah.
let them wait for their time and give those in power easy time to control the country. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for watching and those thoughts on what the leaders should be focusing on. I understand we have another caller from Baringo. Hello? Hi, thanks for calling. What's your name, your comment or question, please?
I'm George Abiero from Baringo.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm calling from Baringo. I'm called George Abiero.
Yes, sir. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, I meant in agreement with Omari, what Omari has said, because what is lucky in prayers are very important, as Koigi is putting it. But something that is quite unfortunate, you see, our leaders pray, and you see that they are praying really, but when they come out of that prayer, it is not reflected in what they are speaking outside.
Right.
They go, they talk. When they part ways, they go and talk other things which are different. I wish, and another question, something which is of my concern. Some of us, we find leaders being prayed for. What informed this, where they go at themselves? Because
Right.
I believe, yes, I
Okay.
wish to be informed more about that.
All right. Thank you so much, George. We appreciate your call tonight. Gentlemen, our time is fast running out. Quickly about IEBC, court has unveiled a team. We saw the meeting between the president and President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga at State House before, that was Tuesday, before Madaraka Day, and the invitation to attend Madaraka Day, which he did not honor. They had their rally at Uhuru Park. Now we have this team, calls for dialogue. The stalemate continues. They say if this doesn't happen by Monday, the protests and demonstrations at the IEBC headquarters will proceed. What needs to happen there? Because a lot of people as well proposing IPPG, where we have been in 1997. Is that where we should go, Omwere?
No, I don't think, well, I'm not sure that we should be going to methods that we applied because the circumstances did not avail to us alternative means. Having to go back to IPPG would mean that everything, all the institutions we have put into place that could help solve us these problems have come to a standstill, and I don't think that is the case. I think the problem we have here has to do with the failure of the president to take charge, in my view, because I think everybody in the country knows that we have a problem of credibility with the IEBC. The president knows as much as the opposition does, and as much as church leaders do. Everybody, most of the people realize that the current IEBC has a problem, but the person who must lead the process of solving this problem has to be the president, because even
He's
as
an interested party. Isn't he an interested party who is saying go back to what the Constitution says?
No. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
He is saying go back to the Constitution and get the answer from there, because up to this moment he has not decided to solve the problem. Because who is going to mobilize Kenyans? Who is going to protect meetings of Kenyans when they meet to discuss what is the problem with the IEBC? When he says, take this matter to Parliament, he is asking people to take this problem to Parliament where he has control. There is the tyranny of numbers waiting for the IEBC case. This case had been taken to Parliament before, and it was thrown out by Parliament. If we go back there, when the president has not decided to solve the problem, and therefore to instruct the Jubilee members of Parliament to play ball and pass the necessary legislation for reforming the IEBC.
So he needs to...
Yeah, he must take charge. He cannot ask Raila to do that. Raila is not the president of this country.
Right.
And Raila will be interested in anything that will solve this problem.
Okay.
But it's not up to Raila to solve the problem. It is up to the president. He is the one with the government. He is the one with the mandate.
Right.
He must take charge.
We'll give you the final word because the president has come out and said on one hand, follow what the law says, go to Parliament. On the other, in terms of your suggestion, he said he doesn't want to embarrass himself again. He doesn't want to come and pronounce himself on issues that are outside his mandate, that there are clear prescriptions as far as how such an issue should be handled. So what is he to do?
My take is this. One, both of the political divides are within the Constitution. CORD is demonstrating pursuant to Article 37. That is Constitution.
Right.
Picketing and demonstration is part of the constitutional provision. The president is saying, follow Article 251, go to Parliament and file a petition. So there is an impasse. There is no part on the two political divide that is outside the Constitution.
Right.
And that is why I agree with Koigi that it is only the instruments of power that the president was given at Kasarani that he needs to use so that he gets a solution to this problem. Because where we are, we can only come out of it through dialogue. There is nothing unconstitutional to have a dialogue. But I do not agree with the way CORD is coming, because CORD and its conditions, the way they are putting the conditions, they are simply saying they are not interested with dialogue. So there is no dialogue, because if the dialogue is already that IBC must be sacked, then there is no dialogue. Dialogue is you move to a meeting with open mind, put your case, convince the other party, then agree on something. But if CORD is saying that the 9 commissioners, that one is not a discussion, they must exit. 2, if we do not talk before Monday, the riots are there. That is already a way to put the president into a trap.
Ultimatum.
In my own view, the challenge, Sophie, Wanuna, the problem of this country is the political class. The politicians have no interest on us. The politicians don't care whether this country goes up in arms. I wish they listened to the late George Saitoti that says that there reaches a time, and I hope tomorrow when they'll be prayed for, they'll be told that it is now the time you put Kenya first and you leave your grandstanding to the other side.
Sophia, can you give me just one sentence? Just to say, as the MPs meet tomorrow to pray for themselves, although they could pray for, they should pray for just 2 things. For God to make them better leaders and make them good Samaritans. Just those 2 things.
Better leaders and
good Samaritans.
And that's the last word tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. Koigi Wamwere, former Subukia Member of Parliament, and Dunstan Omari, who's a political analyst. We much appreciate your time for tonight on The Last Word. And for you watching and sharing your views as well. Director, I don't know if you can give me 2 seconds to read some feedback on Twitter, which I asked for, and I've been accused severally of getting feedback and not reading it. So I want to make sure I don't do that tonight. Mohammed Kadari is saying we are on the precipice of violence. We need to put our knees down so that our leaders can come to their right senses. Munyo says elections must be free and fair. We must do everything to ensure that is the case. Victor Mshindi says on IEBC, the problem really the commissioners or electoral process, inability to authenticate results, not the commissioners. Nyamu Warui, the Constitution clearly says that a judge shall retire upon attaining the age of 70, period. And finally, James Odhiambo, a one-tribe Kenya and not a 42-tribe Kenya, service leadership and not greed leadership, a people of true patriotism. That is your prayer for Kenya. That's a beautiful prayer, and may God bless Kenya. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. I'm Sophia Wanuna.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.